All right, so April 26, 2026, right? And like three pretty wild things pop up within a few hours. The ICC confirms crimes against humanity charges against a former Philippine president. Then a judge in Virginia invalidates a constitutional amendment that 2.5 million people just voted on. And then this Cauchy contract. It's like, will the Supreme Court's composition change? And it's trading at 4 cents on yes, 96 on no. 3 items, 3 different institutional layers, and your feed is just presenting them as 3 shocks.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Marcus. They're really not 3 shocks. They aren't.
No, you're right. They're actually one data point, just like repeated almost.
Exactly. And this is what's so interesting about that data point. Capital is pricing what happened to the birthright citizenship executive order at like 8% probability of implementation in 2026. But legal commentary, reading the oral argument from April 1, they're estimating it around 30%. That's a huge 22 percentage point gap, right? Between the story you're being told and the actual bet people with money on the line are making.
And that gap, it's going to resolve on a clock. Trump v. Barber comes down by late June or early July. So at most, we have like 10 weeks until one of those 2 numbers gets marked to reality. So it really does matter now, huh?
Absolutely. Right now, today, you're literally standing inside a priced disagreement. If you can read it correctly, you know something most of the commentary just doesn't.
Okay, so let's just lay out what the data actually says, completely unedited. 3 institutions issued procedural decisions within hours of each other on April 23rd. You had the ICC pretrial chamber, right, unanimously confirming all 3 crimes against humanity charges against Rodrigo Duterte, committed him to trial. That's the international tier. Then in Virginia, Judge Jack Hurley in Tazewell County, he ruled this mid-decade redistricting amendment invalid, ordered every ballot treated as ineffective. That's the state tier. And then the federal tier. The Cauchy contract on any change in Supreme Court composition before July 1, it sat steady at 96% no change. The contract on Justice Gorsuch specifically leaving 4%.
And Marcus, I really want to stop there because what I keep hearing when people summarize this, and I mean some really serious analysts, is this phrase, doing a lot of quiet work, the institution held.
Yeah, you really don't like that phrase.
I don't trust it. The institution held conflates 2 completely different things. 1, procedure was run, and 2, substance was preserved. Those are absolutely not the same claim. And if you price them as the same claim, you've made a really specific assumption about what an institution is actually for.
Okay, Marilyn, make that concrete for me.
All right, so the Tazewell County ruling, right? Judge Hurley ran procedure. He followed state law, he noted the constitutional postage requirement, issued his ruling. That's procedural motion. It does not tell you whether the Virginia constitutional amendment process, considered as a substantive commitment, was honored or evacuated. It just tells you the forms were filed. Cauchy, it can't distinguish those 2 things because Cauchy prices observable outcomes, and procedural motion is the observable surface of both cases.
So your claim is that the 96% resilience pricing is measuring the wrong thing entirely?
My claim is that it's measuring one thing, the visible surface, and the people reading the number are inferring a second thing, the durable substance, that the instrument was actually never designed to report on. Think about a building inspector versus someone living in the building, Marcus.
Oh, that's a good analogy. The inspector measures like deflection in the columns, puts strain gauges on the beams, runs the instruments. The occupant, though, they feel the building move when a truck goes by. They hear the creaks at night. Both are reporting accurately, but the inspector's gauges can't tell the occupant to stop being afraid, and the occupant's fear can't tell the inspector that a column is actually cracked. They're calibrated to different questions.
Exactly, and I'd push it even further. The inspector's instruments are calibrated for specific failure modes, column deflection, shear stress. But if the building's failing through a mode the gauges don't measure, like mold behind the drywall, or an HVAC system slowly poisoning everyone inside, the gauges read green right up until that failure becomes visible through a different channel. And that's the question I'm putting on the table here.
So is there a mode of institutional failure that Cauchy just can't see? Because if there is, then the institution held isn't a fact. It's a reading that's accurate on the surface, but, potentially missing something one layer down.
I mean, the source analysis tracks something specific, though, the gap between administrative pressure and environmental reality. The administration treats things like citizenship rules as tunable parameters, right? The institutions treat them as boundary conditions. The observed behavior, the ICC confirmation, the Hurley ruling, the Cauchy pricing, all describe this boundary treatment.
Yes, and that's real. I'm not disputing that. But I am disputing that the observation of boundary treatment today tells you anything durable about boundary treatment 6 months from now. Because the actors enforcing those boundaries are human beings. And human beings, they can keep performing the procedure while quietly changing what the procedure means from the inside.
Which is the hidden signal. Wow, that's where this gets really difficult.
Right. So let me name the second-order effect the source analysis identifies but doesn't fully follow through on. It describes a self-reinforcing feedback loop: administrative action, institutional response, precedent, repricing, next administrative action. Clean description. What it doesn't examine closely is which actor updates its behavior first, because the direction of the loop is totally set by that first mover. If litigants update first, you get procedural reinforcement. If the executive branch updates first, you get administrative retreat. But there's a third actor: career civil servants, assistant U.S. attorneys, senior regulators, federal judges below the Supreme Court, inspectors general. And if they update their behavior first, the loop does something capital absolutely cannot price.
They convert from constraint keepers to, like, hedgers?
Yes, they keep running the procedure, but the thing that's changed is they're now running it while documenting their own caution, preparing paper trails, buying personal insurance, writing decisions with elaborate explanations of why they signed. From the outside, you still see procedure. From the inside, though, the posture is defensive. The surface reads the same, but the substance is totally different.
And you want me to tell you what the priced instrument for that is. And the answer is, there isn't one directly, but there is an adjacent one. Go.
Oh, tell me.
Professional liability insurance, the specialty line for career federal officials. Premiums on individual professional indemnity coverage for government attorneys, inspectors general, regulatory officials. If that premium curve is bending up, and insurers actually publish that data at the industry level, you are watching the hedger conversion in real time. A senior DOJ attorney doesn't need to resign or refuse an order to signal she's reclassified her job. She just needs to start paying more for a policy that indemnifies her personally. That's observable behavior, and it leads the Cauchy signal by a significant margin because it prices internal risk assessment by the exact population that runs the procedure.
So the lateral connection from governance analysis isn't into political science, really. It's into specialty insurance markets. Wow, that's so fascinating.
It's a specific mechanism, not just a thematic resonance. The premium curve for federal employee professional liability coverage is a leading indicator because it prices the private risk calculation of the people who run the procedure. If those people are hedging, the procedural motion continues, and the substance just evacuates at the same speed. You wouldn't see it in Cauchy, you know?
Or Polymarket or any major prediction market. None of them have a priced instrument on civil service behavior. The closest proxy is whistleblower complaint frequency, which is a lagging indicator by definition. By the time someone blows the whistle, they've already failed at hedging, right? And now project it forward, 5 to 10 years.
Watch the Federal Register. Career officials signing regulatory decisions, look for the rise of the explanatory signature, a formal note on why they signed, what considerations they weighed. Not a refusal, but a defense of compliance, written into the record in advance of any possible challenge. 5 years of that pattern, and you have an institution that performs the procedure while the people running it are individually insured against being incited. Procedural resilience technically intact, but the substance has...
So that self-reinforcing loop, Marcus, it's accurate. And it has a third attractor the source doesn't name. It can tighten into procedural reinforcement, it can slacken into administrative retreat, or it can maintain its shape while the people inside it just switch roles. And that third path is the one Kalshi is structurally unable to distinguish from the first. Which brings us to the harder question. If we stop here, we've told you a story about what capital might be missing. That's interesting for sure, but it's not yet actionable.
So how do we make it actionable? What's the actual heuristic we give listeners?
Here's my challenge, and I'm going to make it really clean. Your heuristic, the one you're going to give the listener, separates administrative attempts from procedural realities. Fine. But that heuristic is useful only if capital's signal on procedural reality is actually pricing what matters. If the signal is structurally blind to hedger conversion, then your heuristic tells the listener the institution held, in exactly the scenario where the institution has stopped holding in the only way that would ultimately matter. You've handed them a filter that confirms the opposite of what's happening.
That's the strongest version of the challenge, Marilyn. Let me try the strongest version of the response. The claim isn't that Kalshi is always right. The claim is that capital markets update faster than narrative, and that the listener's default bias is to overweight narrative. The 22-point gap in the birthright citizenship case isn't an abstract number. It's the distance between two decision frames. One of them is going to be marked to reality by July. That's not a permanent claim about institutional durability. It's a claim about this specific window, this specific set of contracts, this specific resolution timeline. You're not committing to Kalshi's long-run accuracy. You're using it as a tighter instrument than narrative for the question it can actually answer.
That's a much narrower claim than the 96% number implies on its face, though.
Correct. And more defensible, and more useful. What the listener needs isn't a prediction about the outcome. It's a model of how the institution will reach the outcome. Procedural versus political. That distinction is narrower than 96% resilient, and it survives your hedger conversion challenge, I think.
Does it survive, or does it contain my challenge inside it, Marcus?
It contains it. The hedger conversion story is a substantive institutional decay story. If the court rules procedurally, according to its own established process, whether the outcome favors the amendment or strikes it down is almost beside the point for our heuristic. The institution ran its procedure. The listener can classify that. What the listener separately needs is a non-priced instrument for substantive decay, which is your professional liability premium curve, which is your explanatory signature pattern in the Federal Register. So yeah, we're converging on a compound test, not a simple one.
The simple version fails your own standard, honestly.
You're right about that. Let me build the actual version for listeners. Here's the revised frame. Before forming an opinion on any political news item between now and the Barber ruling, run two questions. First, which layer is this describing? Administrative attempt or procedural reality? If it's an attempt, price it lower than your feed is pricing it. If it's a reality, take it as information, not noise. Second, and this is the part the simple version totally missed, check one non-priced instrument. Professional liability premium data is public. Federal Register signature patterns are public. Whistleblower complaint frequencies are tracked. Pick one. If both layers are saying the same thing, your signal is durable. If they diverge, the divergence itself is the information. That's the key.
And here's the one thing I really want you to carry out of this. After the April 1 oral argument in Trump versus Barbara, Kalshi repriced the birthright citizenship order downward, towards 7%. The market didn't just hold its prior, it got more confident as the institution performed. That's a real data point. It's evidence of what capital can absorb. But notice the shape of it. Kalshi moved because it watched procedure run, and it extrapolated from procedure to outcome. If the mode of institutional failure is the evacuation of substance beneath intact procedure, and I'm not saying it is, I'm saying we don't have the priced instrument to check, Kalshi would reprice the same direction for the opposite reason. You would feel more confident as the failure actually accelerated.
Because you'd be watching the procedure hold, right?
Exactly. That's the priced signal for both futures. They're indistinguishable from the dashboard.
Which is why you don't run with one instrument. So the next visible test is the Virginia Supreme Court ruling, days away. The one after that is Barbara, 10 weeks. Those are the priced instruments firing.
But the invisible test, that's already underway. Watch both.
Before we wrap up, a huge thank you to everyone watching and listening. If you found this discussion insightful, please consider liking this video, leaving a comment with your thoughts, sharing it with a friend, or subscribing to our channel for more deep dives like this. So we've outlined a compound test for institutional health, Moving beyond single-point indicators, it's about recognizing that while priced instruments like Cauchy show us what capital can absorb and extrapolate from procedure, they are structurally blind to the quieter shifts in substance.
Exactly. The market might react positively to procedure being run, even if the meaning of that procedure is being quietly reevaluated by the very people executing it. The surface reading can be misleading if you're not also looking for those cracks behind the drywall, as we call them.
Which means our listeners should be integrating those non-priced signals, professional liability premiums, Federal Register signatures, whistleblower trends, into their analysis. It's about maintaining that dual perspective, the visible, rapid-fire signals versus the slower, deeper shifts.
The key is the divergence. If both sets of indicators align, you have a stronger signal. But when they diverge, that divergence itself is the critical information. It's not about being alarmist, it's about being accurately calibrated to the actual institutional reality.
So watch both, always.
Watch both. That really is the bottom line, isn't it, Marilyn? It's about empowering listeners to see beyond the immediate, surface-level signals.
Absolutely, Marcus. It's about understanding that the official procedures can continue to run smoothly, even as the underlying substance shifts. The real intelligence is in triangulating those two streams of data.
So, for our listeners, it's about not just reading the headline, but understanding the system's pulse from multiple angles,